Pizza. Is this thing on? I think it is. So I'm Aaron Cohen. I'm one of the professors, associate professors in DMICE, the Department of Medical Informatics and Clinical Epidemiology, and the director of Commercial Partnerships and Collaboration, or maybe it'd be easier to say I'm the director of the Informatics Discovery Lab. So welcome to another Informatics Discovery Lab industry leadership talk. These are talks that the Department of Medical Informatics is sponsoring as part of our Informatics Discovery Lab initiative. What's the Informatics Discovery Lab initiative, you might ask? Well, what this is a new initiative of the department to really focus more outwardly. I mean, I think we always focus on important healthcare problems, but we're not necessarily focused on, you know, what to do with those solutions, how to get them out into the world, and what that takes. So the mission of the IDL is to really increase both innovation and the impact of that innovation by increasing industry partnerships, which will help us deploy some of these innovations more broadly. We've got a number of strategies, including collaborative research and development, the establishment of non-traditional educational opportunities, developing a more entrepreneurial culture around informatics and healthcare innovation, which is kind of why we're here today. I just wanted to mention a few of the initiatives that are going on right now in the IDL. Number one is a predictive analytics service, which is headed by Dr. David Dorr. The vendor visits and IDL talks, such as this one that we're having right now. We're looking into the expansion of the internship and practicum programs much more broadly, both in terms of students and also in terms of the kinds of opportunities. And really educating the OHSU community, both informatics and outside the informatics community, about entrepreneurial skills and topics. And that kind of is why we're here today. You might ask, why is Tech Transfer giving us a talk in the IDL Leadership Series? And really the issue is that how do you be an entrepreneur in the informatics world? How do you get your things out there? How do you work with industry? Well, Tech Transfer is really the group at OHSU. It's tasked with helping innovators get their ideas out of the research lab and into the real world of patients and providers and manufacturers and healthcare systems and healthcare software system providers. And so today we have our guest, Andrew Watson, who's the Director of Technology Transfer and Business Development at OHSU. And he's going to teach us what we need to know to effectively use the resources of tech transfer and business development to be more entrepreneurial OHSU. And this will help us achieve our goals of becoming a more entrepreneurial culture, becoming informatics entrepreneurs, and widely deploying our innovations out into the real world. So I just won't have one last thing to say because I always forget to say it, so I have a note here. Push the button, right? So Andrew's going to talk for a little while, then he's going to take questions. These sessions are recorded, so please, when you ask your question, push the button so the little red light is on. Unfortunately, you have to hold it down, and so your question gets recorded along with the answer because a lot of times the answer makes more sense if you know what the question is. So with that, I will turn it over to Andrew. And thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Deborah, for the invitation to talk today. I brought two of my colleagues from Technology Transfer and Business Development with me, who you may know, but they work directly with you because they're assigned to your department. So they're going to come up here as well at different parts and give a little deeper dives into the aspects that they handle within technology transfer and business development. And feel free to, I want this to be an open session. Feel free to ask questions at any time. What I want to do is give you an overview of technology transfer and business development here at OHSU. Some of you may have worked with us in the past, others maybe not. And you might not know all that we can do for you, all the services we can provide. And so we want to get more engaged with what you're doing here in the department. So what is our department? What do we do? OHSU research drives discoveries that improve healthcare, create jobs, expand the economy, and improve quality of life. Okay? So one of our primary goals in technology transfer and business development is to bridge the gap between promising research, and that could be basic wet lab research or the research you do here in DMICE. And we want to move that out of the walls of the university so it can benefit the public. That's our number one goal. And we could do that a number of ways. We could just publish everything that happens here and just get it out in the public domain. That's getting it outside the walls of OHSU. Otherwise, we can work with industry, and that's what my department really is good at and does day in and day out, is partnering with industry, because industry will then develop the products and services that will solve problems. It will come up with a solution for a problem. So to reach this goal, we need your participation. We are only as good as the ideas and the interactions we have with all of you. So we can't do it alone. We need your help. We need your input. So for those of you that don't know, I'm not quite the top of the food chain in technology transfer and business development. We do have a vice president for business tech transfer and business development. It's Dr. Timothy Stout. He's also a practicing clinician here at OHSU. He's a pediatric ophthalmologist at KCI Institute. And he also is a researcher. He has his own fairly well-funded research lab at KCI Institute. So he sees this from a lot of different angles, both from the basic research, the clinic, and working in tech transfer business development to bridge the gap between those two. So what are some of the reasons that you may work with our office? Think about that. But here are some of the possibilities. Developing a new technology. Protecting your unpublished work. Are you wanting to generate more lab departmental funding? Collaborating with outside researchers. Seeing your research or idea become a product or service. Meeting the obligations of a research contract. Many of you, if you have an NIH-funded grant or contract or any other research project, there may be obligations in there that we actually have to help out with at the end, closing out the grant. Protecting new discoveries and starting your own business. There's maybe some of you that have an idea of, well, I want to have my own business at some point based on the research, based on the work I do here at OHSU. We help facilitate that. We spin out anywhere from 2 to 4 new companies a year out of OHSU. This past year we spun out 2. Trying to forecast the future, I'm guessing that by the end of the upcoming June, we may have half a dozen companies this year that are spun out of OHSU. So we're trying to do this more and more, and the university is very supportive of entrepreneurism and starting your own business. So I want to give a little of the structure of our department. We've got primarily 5 different work teams, work groups within the office, and you may interact with those groups at different times for different projects. So we have an industry and academic collaborations group that I will let Trina Voss talk about a little bit later. We have a technology development and licensing group on the far right, which Arvind Paranjape, who many of you have probably worked with, he'll talk about that a little bit further. We also, about 2.5 years ago, we formed an in-house patent team. We call it a patent team because that's primarily what they do is draft, prosecute, maintain patent protection on intellectual property or new ideas discovered here at OHSU. But they do work with other forms of IP protection, that being copyright or trademark as well. So we can get into that a little bit as well if you want. Again, this is more of a high-level overview. But there are reasons, and Arvind will probably talk a little bit about this, especially with things that happen in this department of patenting versus copywriting, and especially with software. So we can get into that. Business development, so the other part of TTBD, the BD is business development. Business development was formed about 6 years ago to have two primary roles. Originally one role, now they've have a second primary role. The first is to increase industry partnerships between OHSU and outside industries. So we want to be looked upon by the industry community as a partner that they want to work with. They want to come here to Portland, find out what's going on in the laboratories here, and work with us. And that could be collaborating, that could be funding research here, that could be forming a joint venture, that could be licensing technology from us to put into their product pipeline. So a variety of ways that we can partner with industry, but we need to have those initial interactions to see if there's any chance of forming interactions with that industry partner. So our business development does that. The other major role that they've taken on in the past year is our startup company program. They are still in the process of revamping this, but we're putting a more formalized process in place of trying to educate those that are interested in starting a company, as well as helping our companies after they're launched and maybe after they move out of the walls of OHSU. Whether that's hooking them up with investors that come to us asking us, we want to look at your companies in this space. We can showcase those companies. We help hook them up with management to help run the company. We may know if they're needing FDA advisors for federal approvals. We may know consultants that we can help hook them up with. So we try to help them along both pre-launch and post-launch, because if they succeed, OHSU succeeds, because the technology that they're developing gets closer to being out in the public and for public benefit. And then really supporting all of us is our administrative services group of finance, marketing, communications folks in the office. So we've tried to do a number of new events recently. I think some of you maybe attended Arvin's brown bag session last month on software patents and licensing. We have that every other month, a different topic every other month. We have quarterly newsletters now going out. So we want to tell you all that's going on with what we do, as well as what are some of the changes happening in the world around technology transfer, around intellectual property. Big change earlier this year in patent law, the largest change in the last 60 years or so in the United States. So we want to let people know what's now changed, what's different than it was a year ago. So we want to get communications out, and that's a lot of what the Administrative Services Group helps with as well. So one of the questions I know we're asked a lot, and I know from talking with Deborah and Aaron and Bill earlier, was, when and where do you contact us, and what do we do? Where can we help with? So what I want to do is, this is probably a rough schematic timeline of a process you may take on in your everyday practice, from having a research idea to, now I need funding to carry out my research idea. So I get funding. I do the research. So all of these first sections of having a research idea, funding, and then carrying out the research, we have at least two groups that can help in different aspects of that. Business development, they can, if you've got an idea, they can maybe hook you up with industry or other partners that can help with funding for that. There's many non-for-profit organizations that we also help connect our researchers with. There are also internally within OHSU a number of research consortiums that our business development group has now formed across the campus. One of these groups is in pain. You wouldn't imagine how many researchers across the university deal in some aspect of pain who didn't know each other, who didn't know what the others did. So this was a way to connect those researchers within our own institution so that they could now, and many of those groups have been successful at writing large collaborative group grant applications together. So we can help with funding. We also can help with funding on the industry side, introducing you to industry partners who have a need. They have a problem, and maybe we have the solution, or maybe we can come up with the solution. But we have the expertise here at OHSU that can fill that gap for them. And that's where we try to fit in with industry, is we want to hear what their needs are, and we try to fill those needs if we can. And then industry and academic collaborations group, they deal with, if a company wants to fund you, they will do the agreements. And I'm not going to steal Trina's thunder, but maybe you need a research material for your research. So they'll do a material transfer agreement. Or maybe you want to collaborate with a group up at University of Washington or at Portland State University, and you want to protect your ideas that maybe that you share in that collaboration. Well, we can put together a collaboration agreement. We do this quite often with other research institutions as well as industry. There's no money changing hands. Maybe there's some materials, but it's really an exchange of ideas back and forth, and it protects both parties' interest to publish. It kind of spells out, okay, who's going to publish, when. It protects any intellectual property that's developed. If there's new software developed, it'll carve out and spell out how all those aspects of the collaboration will work between the parties. So going down the continuum, when you're doing your research, maybe you've got a new discovery, something new. You've discovered something that solves a problem, a solution to a problem. Well, that's something, and I'll let Arvin talk more about this, but that's something you may want to likely disclose to our office, which we can then assess further, decide whether there's protection needed. If we do pursue those angles, we then try to move it out of the university through marketing mechanisms, licensing, and we manage those license agreements after they're done. So this whole process really is handled by the Technology Development and Licensing team, which Arvin is your representative from that team for this department. But within that, there are other groups in our office that handle different parts of the process as well. When we get a new invention disclosed to our office, if there's federal funding or if you've received funding from industry partner, we are required to disclose that and report that to that sponsor, whether it's the NIH, the DoD, or Company X. From the protection side, our patent team may get involved, whether it's registering a copyright or drafting, filing a new patent application. And also from our marketing licensing side, if we're doing a new startup company formation, Arvin will be working with a member of our business development team to help with that startup formation. Okay. At the end goal, if we're successful in this whole continuum, this is what I would call the technology transfer continuum. If we're successful, there's royalty income that comes back to the university. So that's our finance group within the office handles how that royalty income is split. And I can go into how that's split if you're interested, but it's shared between the university, these defined units within the university, and then the inventors or the creators of that invention. Okay. So that's the whole process. Now what I'm going to do is go a little bit further in depth on very specific aspects of that. So I'm breaking out different parts of that continuum. So you know where, when, how we can help you. Okay? So our business development group, again, they support OHSU's commercialization mission. They can help foster academic industry partnerships and alliances. And they are one of your primary liaisons between industry and OHSU. If you're having conversations with industry, someone probably from our office should at least be there to make sure we're not giving away anything and we're helping to protect you and the university. So our business development team can participate in that. And they help from the very beginning to expand the commercial potential of researchers and centers here at OHSU. So, again, at the very beginning of the stage, you have a research idea. How am I going to fund it? Is it time to partner with industry early on? If you work with products, I imagine, from industry all the time, from companies. You probably purchase them. Well, you often discover, well, they have flaws. So is there some way to improve that? Is there some way to improve that software? Is there some way to improve that device? Well, if you do, or maybe if you have an idea, before you disclose your solution to that problem, before you disclose your solution to that flaw in the software or hardware, you might want to get us involved so that we can help protect that idea and work with you on the appropriate way to interact with that industry partner. Because oftentimes you'll just disclose this improvement to the company will just incorporate it in their materials and not tell you anything about it. So, great, thanks. Okay? So, business development can help in the early stages. And also while you're... okay, go ahead.
You have an idea, like, short of making your own version of whatever that software is and selling it from scratch as a company, I mean, what would OHSU be able to do? Like, do you go to Epic and say, hey, Epic, we have an idea how to improve this screen, and Epic says, great, let's pay you for it? I mean, how does that really... If you're going to get to that later, we can get to that later. But
if it's an improvement to an existing product, that's often how it works. It may be a small incremental improvement or maybe a large improvement. But it's something, if the party that has, this product and this little improvement adds additional value to their product to that product and future sales, they might want to incorporate that, and what we would do is want to license that improvement to them. So yes, and we do that, I would say, quite frequently. Here, do you want the microphone?
Oh, sorry. So the first question would be, how do you go about protecting that intellectual property? So if there was a way that we could, if it were something patentable, and if a company would be interested in it, that's the best mechanism, because then it's the hardest for them to practice without our permission, or in other words, without our license. If it's not patentable, then in theory they can design around it, they can recode it, right? If your software is written, if it's somewhat complex and you're saving them quite a bit of time to get a copyright license so that they can start kind of 2 steps ahead by taking your software and modifying it or just translating it into another language, then that might be the best mechanism for them.
Thank you. I mean, actually, it's good that Steve mentioned Epic, because I believe that our licensing agreement with Epic as their customer, I think, explicitly turns over all intellectual property that's created. And I guess to generalize the question, the comment or question is, aren't a lot of these kinds of issues sort of protected by the business arrangements that we as users have with those companies?
Some of them are, and some of them are not. And I think Arvin can get into this a little further. It depends on the agreements or license agreements, I think, that accompany many of these products. With Epic, over the last few years, there have been some improvements to Epics or add-ons to Epic that have come to our department and our way. To this point, Epic hasn't been interested in anything. Yeah. So, yeah, I think if it's a huge, substantial change to Epic's platform, maybe they would be interested, and I don't actually know the details of OHSU's agreement with them.
Actually, I believe our Epic license means we have to turn some things over to them, but not necessarily everything.
So that's actually an interesting and very timely point, because we have some ongoing discussions with Epic, and part of what's come up in these discussions is that they're very interested in their customers, especially their academic customers, being more innovative and pushing the boundaries of their product to invent in a way. And
Yep.
so, knowing what inventions we have to turn over to them for free versus what inventions we could mutually benefit from is kind of a big deal. And also, it would inform us. I mean, I think specifically with Epic, because they're such a gorilla. I don't mean that in the mean sense. I mean that in the big sense.
Yep.
That they that may change the way we discuss things with them. If we know that everything we're going to develop, we're going to turn over with them in any way, then maybe we want a little more support up front to start to invent some of those things and target some of those things. If
Right.
that's not the
Right.
case,
Right.
then we may be willing to put in our own effort and then reap the benefits later
On a
as
license.
they license
Yep.
these things. So it's
Yep.
kind of an
Yep.
important
Yep.
particular context that we kind of need to know more about, specifically to informatics.
Yeah, and that's something honestly I'm not going to say I know what the language of that agreement is. I know my counterpart at ITG probably does, because they're more engaged with that process. But no, that's something I think we should definitely find that out. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Trina to talk about the next couple slides, because this is the group in the office that she works with. I'm not going to say anything further on that. So maybe just...
Okay, so if there's anything I hate more than public speaking, it's microphones, so this should be fun. Anyway, my name is Trina Voss. I've been at OHSU for about 2.5 years, working mostly in this group on sponsored research agreements, non-disclosure agreements, and material transfer agreements. Before that, I was at USC working much more in the licensing, so I can make comments whether or not you want to hear them or whether or not Andrew wants me to make them on a lot of what we're talking about today, like Epic. And one thing I'd like to point out is that this group has a huge advantage over a lot of the departments here at OHSU when it comes to commercializing, because what you guys do is very focused. You see problems, you fix problems. You're not coming up with some little tiny detailed chemical that's going to have to go through a lot of steps to commercialize. So don't be thinking that we're health and science and you guys don't get all the attention, because when it comes to commercialization, you guys have a big advantage over a lot of the groups. So what we do, what I specifically do, my group does, is we work when you guys are trying to get research materials. A lot of the time we talk about material transfer agreements because somebody wants a chemical or a mouse or something like that. But we also do them for software and we do them for data sets. So if you need software or data set, it really, really helps to come to us and talk to us about it. Because you know as well as I do that you can sneak it in the back door. You can just send your stuff out. It's probably a lot easier than coming and talking to me. But if you sneak the stuff in or out and then you come up with a brilliant idea, that's when it gets sticky, because we may not own what you invented because we forgot to do the right paperwork on it. So it's much better to do it up front. Another thing that we work on is industry-sponsored research. So sometimes that's an amazing idea that you guys are going to really love, and it's a huge project, and it's going to be a huge leap forward in science. And sometimes they're, shall we say, not as academically interesting. They're smaller projects, but to be honest, they pay the bills. So if you guys are completely funded and you don't need any kind of sponsored research, that's great. I'll be happy to leave you alone. But if you guys are looking to get a little bit more money into the labs and do things that you're really good at and that have some academic interest but may not be your dream project, then I can work with you on some of that stuff too. Another thing that we do is research collaborations. In general, there's no money tied to these, but it may give you access to data sets. It may give you access to other researchers that you want to publish with. It may give you opportunities to do some really amazing work. I'm always a little bit leery about research collaborations with industry. I'm not saying they're bad. Sometimes you can get great things. But every now and then you see ones that come through, and we're doing an awful lot of work, and they're getting an awful lot of value out of it. So we want to be careful to make sure that if they're getting most of the value, that they're going to help fund some of it too. And another thing that we do is we help protect OHSU information. So if you're going to be talking to a company, or if you're going to be talking to another group, and you've got this really great, amazing idea, come and talk to us and see if we should protect it first. We can do a simple 2-page CDA, confidential, I always mix up the words on that one. It's a confidential disclosure agreement or a non-confidential, it's a CDA or an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. They mean the exact same thing. The words are almost exactly opposite, and I can never keep them straight. It's a really simple agreement. We can get it signed. It doesn't take that long. It will protect us if all of a sudden the company has this amazing idea that looks an awful lot like your amazing idea, because we can come back and show that it was ours. So that's pretty much everything that's on that one. Okay, so for last year, this lab had one non-disclosure agreement, and the ones that I work on are not specifically for technologies. So if you have a disclosure and you have this great invention and you tell our company about it, you tell our office about it, and you want to go talk to a company, then Arvind's going to take care of those agreements. They're virtually identical. It's just how we separated things. But we had one non-disclosure agreement where we were just kind of generally talking to a company about future projects. We had one sponsored research agreement. That's actually a no-cost extension. That's just a fancy way we write it. That means we were working on a project. We didn't finish it up. We did, again, a really simple agreement. It was 1 page. It didn't take very long, and it allowed us to continue the funding. So if you're working on an agreement and you're almost done and you're running out of time and you've still got money and you're not done, come and talk to us, because that's really easy to get taken care of. And we had 3 material transfer agreements. The year before that, we had 1 non-disclosure agreement and 3 sponsored research agreements. Before that, we had 3 MTAs and 2 SRAs. So we've had about 4 or 5 agreements every year for the last couple of years. Again, this is the kind of lab that has a really great chance to do more sponsored research agreements. So sponsored research agreements, they put money into the lab. They put projects, they give people projects to work on. Some of them are amazing and spectacular. Some of them may not be as spectacular, but we always reserve the right to publish on them. You don't have to do them. I'm not going to come to you and say, you've got to do this agreement because I've got to get signed off to make my boss happy. So if you want any help with that, come and talk to me. Yes?
So one thing that's related but you haven't touched on is, do we ever license our data to someone else?
Yes. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. And it depends if it would fall to Arvind or I, depending on a lot of things. Who is it going to? If we're sending out data to simply another research institute, we would probably do it in a material transfer agreement, or do it in a license and call it a material transfer agreement. If it's something that we find is particularly valuable, that not many people have, and that we want to have more control over what the other group's doing, we might do it more as a license. And there's a chance of taking our data and actually licensing it to a company and bringing in quite a bit of money. But we always have to be very careful with that, because we have to make sure we know where the data came from. We need to make sure it's ours. We didn't get it in on an MTA or sneak it in the back door and forget to tell anybody about it. And we need to make sure that we've got the permissions to pass it on. Because anytime you're talking about patient data, you've got to be really, really careful to make sure that we're not violating those patients' rights. Is there any other questions? Okay, excellent. Yes?
With this data thing, so you mentioned like corpora or other kinds of data sets. If a data set is publicly available, like on the internet, the such and such, like the I don't know, such and such linguistic corpus, and it's just on the internet to download, and we with some sort of license about copyright, whatever university made it, but you can use it for your research.
Right.
Is that something we need to, every time we download one of those, we're supposed to tell you guys about it, or?
No.
Okay.
But every time you download it, if you make a copy of that license that you download it with, you'll make my job a lot easier. And if you come to us and say, hey, I built this great thing, and remember to tell us that you built it on this corpora, especially if you can give me a license, the license that you downloaded it by, that will make our job much, much easier. Okay. And Arvin's going to talk a little bit more about what you can or can't use. But anytime you bring something in, just hold on to the paperwork for me. Anybody else? Okay.
Let's see if that makes too much noise. Okay. My name's Arvin Pranjpe, and that's actually a great question because that is a good segue into what I'll be discussing, which is, whoops. Let's see. I don't see my slides. There they are. Okay. Which is, permissions when you receive something. It could be data, it could be software. Generally, I'm talking about software, though. You can imagine 3 different types of licenses, very high level. You got the free and open source software license, right? You have a permissive license, and you have, lastly, proprietary licenses. The free and open source software license is actually, there's a lot of obligations sort of written into those licenses, and those are referred to as copyleft licenses. That's the middle box there, copyleft. Permissive, that type of license places the fewest restrictions on you, the recipient. So if you receive software under an MIT license or the Berkeley Software Distribution License, those are considered permissive licenses. You can modify that software and distribute it. You wouldn't have to go back to the original author and ask them for permission. You can, and actually just following along for taking the first box, so that means you can, as far as downstream from you, you can send it out. Well, let's just imagine, okay, so let's say you are in that middle column, and you want to create software that you wish to license under a permissive license. If so, the only software you can incorporate and modify must be permissively licensed to you. If it's copyleft and then you try to license it downstream under the MIT license, that doesn't work. They're not compatible. Similarly, if it's proprietary, so if you broke open the Microsoft Word code and and you made derivative work, well, I'm sure in the terms of use in the license agreement there that Microsoft had with you, they didn't give you permission to make derivative works, and so you can't distribute downstream. Taking the second box down, copyleft, let's say you want to create software that you wish to license under a copyleft license. So that's free and open source software license. Examples are the GNU GPL, the Affero GNU GPL, the Affero GPL, the lesser GPL. These are all copyleft licenses. If so, then the software you can use to incorporate that you can take and modify, and that's the left side of the column there. You can take permissively licensed software to you and copyleft. They're compatible. So if you took a GPL code and then you downstream you modified and you created some software, your software you licensed under a GPL, that's fine. The stuff that you took has to be licensed under an AGPL. You have to provide those notices in your license, and that would be all right. Downstream from you, all recipients must keep that copyleft, so they can't modify it and then license it under any other terms. And then the last one down below, the middle column, proprietary license. So if you wish to create software that you want to provide restrictions on users and recipients, well, the only software you can incorporate is under a permissive license, and then downstream, those downstream users cannot make any kind of modifications. So, this is a very brief slide deck that I have here, and it's probably going to create a lot of questions in your mind, and we'll try to get into Q&A and talk about different licenses if you have questions. I did not actually, I decided against focusing on the intellectual property protection decisions of when we go with a patent, when we go with a copyright license only. And if you have questions, we can find slides and try to get through that. But what this slide here is trying to do is it's trying to give you an example of what happens over time. There's a very long lag period before a technology is actually commercialized. So what happens here? So as far as patent law goes, an invention is something that is conceived as conception. That means an idea, and it's reduced to practice. Otherwise, it doesn't rise to the level of an invention. So at the top here, conception, you have the idea. It may or may not be reduced to practice. It's close, though. You provide an invention disclosure to us. That's all those yellow chevrons are our office being involved. The top three blue ones are you. We receive that invention disclosure. We, sorry. I don't know why it's showing up over there. Okay, so we would work with you to try to understand two things: patentability, commercial viability. So patentability, that has to do with things like non-obviousness, utility, and novelty. Those are the metrics. Those are the sort of things we have to get across in order for it to be patentable. On the commercial viability side, we're asking questions like, what is the product? What's the market? What's the competition? We would work with you to understand that. If the dollars on the commercial viability side are great enough to justify the risk in paying for the patent costs, then we will go ahead and file. It also has to be, of course, potentially patentable. So if it meets all those, then we would file the provisional patent application. During that time period, we would want to beat your publication or presentation with our filing, and then during that time period, we would expect that you would be presenting on this idea. You may do further validation of your concept. We want to get proof of concept in, and within 1 year of our provisional patent application filing, we have to make a decision as to whether or not to continue to pursue patent rights or not. Patent protection is very expensive. There's these dollar signals here, dollar signs, and they get bigger and bigger as you go down the timeline. Small dollar, think $1,000 to $5,000 for a provisional patent application. PCT patent application, think 5 to 10, and nationalization. Well, we haven't gotten to it yet, but nationalization, think on the order of $30,000 to $50,000 per country. Very expensive. So at each stage of the game, we're trying to make a rational business decision whether or not we should continue on the process. So if we did file a PCT application, what that means is it's a patent cooperation treaty patent application, which is like a holding tank. We reserve the ability to nationalize into a very large number of countries, essentially all developed countries and virtually all developing countries throughout the world. And what's good about it is that it puts off the nationalization decision for another 18 months. Once we file that PCT, we still have another 18 months, and that means we are delaying those costs. Gives you another 18 months to hopefully get further proof of concept, and me more time to try to get a licensee. I'll be communicating out to companies to try to license this technology to them. Towards the end there, so that would be the PCT application. I'll explain the NDAs in a second. At this time of the go no-go decision, when we're trying to decide what countries to file our patent applications in, hopefully we have a licensee on board, an exclusive licensee that will pay those patent costs, and they will be the ones driving the decision, saying, "Yeah, our market is the U.S. and the EU and China, and everything else we don't care about. And yes, we will pay you back within 30 days of invoice. So go in those countries, and we'd be happy to comply." However, if we don't license it by that time, then it puts us in a sticky situation where we have to decide where are we going to try to obtain rights and where are we going to forego rights. Generally speaking, our office follows the policy that if we don't have a licensee in place and it's at this stage of the game, we are going U.S. only. We have to keep our costs low, and the U.S. in probably the majority of the cases is still 50% of the market. So we're getting 50% of the market with one patent application. It's hard to beat that. Now, as far as the specific dates and the title here, this has to do with an actual license that we executed in July of this year. It is a software for OCT, optical coherence tomography. It was created by Ricky Wang, and it leads to extremely sensitive vasculature images of the eye, useful for determining the health of the retina and choroid, etc. So we licensed this to Zeiss. It's in our license agreement. We have the ability to disclose that. Normally, we have to keep that under wraps as to who's the licensee, but here we can disclose it. We licensed it to Zeiss. As far as the timeline goes, let's see here. We received an invention disclosure and filed on it within a month. So we actually had very little lead time. You can see here. So we received the invention disclosure January 2010. The next month we filed the provisional patent application. Normally we would need more time, and mistakes can be made if that happens. And we'd ask for 2 or 3 months of lead time before you're going to publish. But Ricky told us that he's going to be publishing. We worked very hard to get that patent application in. 12 months later, we filed our PCT, and then we filed our PCT, and that gave us 18 months, right here, 18 months to try to get a licensee. And we did enter talks with 3 OCT companies. We had our pitch for why this was a valuable technology. It would open up markets to their high sensitive, to their higher end OCT machines. Only the higher end OCT machines would be able to get this type of detail, so it's kind of like a selling point for their very expensive machines. Out of the 3 companies, Zeiss was the one that continued to stay interested. We tried to non-exclusively license it to all 3 of them, figuring this would be the best way to bring in the most royalties as well as get the product out into the public space. But the other 2 declined. And we were able to get the license agreement in place, but notice the discrepancy. So August 2012, we needed to have that license in place, and we didn't. And it was almost a full year later we actually did the license agreement. So that put us in a very difficult spot where we tried to decide, what do we do? Do we just drop everything and go U.S. only? I was able to get Zeiss to commit to some dollar amount at this stage of the game in August, and that helped, so that kind of bought us time. And then during that, so because we received that upfront payment, we had enough money to kind of go ahead and file in the countries they requested. and sure enough, we were able to get the license in place. Any questions regarding sort of the life cycle of, yeah?
So I was wondering, this is for a medical device. Does
Sure.
the timeline vary significantly by products or medical device? So I was wondering whether the timeline varies significantly by type of product that you're patenting.
Great question.
Medical device versus software, for example.
Yeah, great question. So there's the life cycle of commercialization, which will depend quite a bit on, whether it's software, medical device, compound, biologic. And then there's the life cycle of patent protection and commercialization from our standpoint. Okay, this isn't getting it out into the to users so that as of this date, users are not getting scans on their eyes. They still have to go through the whole FDA thing. It's going to take several years for them to actually get this out in clinics. Probably around the order of about 3 or 4 years. But as far as the patent life cycle, it's all the same because these are all prescribed by statute as to when this provisional expires, how long of a holding time you have when you file the PCT patent application, that sort of thing. You're welcome. Yes, Aaron.
So, roughly speaking, how much does the licensing value have to be to make it worth going through, at least to the U.S. only patentability? I mean, what are we talking about here?
So if we were to assume U.S. only, total patent costs of, let's say, $15,000, then it should be greater than $15,000.
Okay.
And then it past that, I'd say, what are we looking at? Are we looking at this thing is we're definitely going to license this. It's only going to maybe bring in somewhere on the order of $20,000 to $30,000 or $20,000 to $50,000, but we'll definitely be able to license this at least once, perhaps a couple times, versus, wow, this might be a home run. We don't know. Chances are small, but it might be like bringing in a couple $1 million a year. So it's all based on risk and what you expect as far as return. It's risk and return analysis.
But the risk is fixed.
No, risk is going to, probability. Probability of success and return. So probability of success or sum is going to be very small. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Is there any specific timeline between the provisional patent application and the PCT?
For timeline between the provisional patent application and the PCT. Good question. So generally speaking, it's 12 months, but not always. Sometimes you want to file the PCT earlier based on your publications. So it's case by case. Let me see if I have another slide. Oh yes. Okay. So I have this example. So it's another example of a software that we licensed, and
Maybe I can just ask, we're got only about 5 minutes left. We can go through another licensing example, or go hit some of the high points on our involvement in startups and royalty sharing, other things of TTBD. What's maybe of interest in the last 5 minutes or so?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear about the royalty sharing policy.
Okay.
Go for it. Oh. Okay.
All right. So this was another example that Arvin was going to talk about, and also another device here that OHSU has successfully commercialized. The startup process, this is, again, from the chart earlier, with the business development group being involved in startup formation. They help to support the faculty in launching these startups, creating and providing resources for you if you're interested in starting up a company. So we could have a whole seminar just on starting up a company. It's a real different endeavor. If you've never done it before, there's a lot of things you probably don't know, and that's why we try to let you know up front what you're getting yourself into before you really take that leap. So then Administrative Services Group, again, handles a lot of different things for our office. One thing they do, which is on that continuum, is the royalty income sharing. So OHSU has a royalty distribution policy. Roughly, if a technology is successful, it breaks down to about a third goes to the inventors, a third goes to what are defined units at the university, that being School of Medicine, School of Dentistry, School of Nursing, Research Development Administration, the hospital, and I might be missing one or two there. The idea is that the money that goes to the unit is hopefully shared with the department or departments that helped fund that researcher or those inventors, creators, to help money flow back into research. I'll show you a chart to really keep the continuum going. The other third is held by OHSU, and currently that's used to fund a lot of our operations in TTBD, but that could always be pulled and used other ways by OHSU. It's a complicated formula. The first 50,000 we bring in, 40% goes to the inventors, and then the other is split between the unit and OHSU 30-30. Of the next 50,000, so up to 50 to 100,000 is split 35% to the inventors, and then trying to figure out the math, and then it's split between the unit and OHSU, the remainder part. Yeah.
So if you invest personal income or the departmental income, something like this, would that be recovered first before you start to split royalties?
No, under policy, the only financial resources that are, what we call recoverable are patent expenses that our office undertakes, or if it's a copyrighted material and we register the copyright with the Department of Commerce, then that's recoverable off the top. But no, the department funds are not recoverable off the top. There are some alternative ways that we can try to do that, but it's not looked upon favorably by others in the university. Really, for tangible materials, if we're set, my background is wet lab, so if we have a tangible antibody that we put in, the lab put in $5,000 to create that antibody, and we're just providing that antibody out to end users, not directly to a company that's then going to sell, but directly to the end user. And we want to recoup some of that R&D money from the end user. We often can bring money in and then share all of that with the lab, and we call that a product fee. But that's really when we're sending it or licensing it to an end user. And then beyond 100,000, if we bring in beyond 100,000, it's 30% to the inventors, and then the remaining 70% is split 35-35 between the unit and OHSU. So inventors get more at the front end, less on the back end over time. It's roughly a third. Okay. So again, this is the whole continuum. We could keep talking probably on different aspects of it, and we'd love to come back and drill down to certain areas that maybe are of more interest to all of you. But this is the whole continuum. And at the end of the day, we hope that royalty income from those discoveries, from that technology, brings that royalty income in and shuttles right back to the beginning and starts the process over again. So we want that funding, that money to be put back into the research engine here at OHSU and keep the new ideas and new discoveries coming through. That's our end goal is to do that, but also get these technologies out of the university. So I'm not going to go through, this is, if you're interested, look for this article from July. We put this article on Research News blog here at OHSU. This is a inventive postdoc. We had our annual awards night last night. She received the New Inventor of the Year award from OHSU, from our department. Her story is very interesting because it was a postdoc who had a problem in her lab, and she developed a solution for her basic research problem. That solution has now been licensed out to a substantial research tool company called CloneTech, and products is on the market now and being sold worldwide. So, it doesn't have to be the next blockbuster drug. It doesn't have to be the next blockbuster diagnostic. This is a basic researcher had a problem in the lab, solved that problem, and that solution now is being it's the solution now used worldwide by other researchers. And then the other thing is we have, back in April, we released a comprehensive guide to everything we do. So a lot of what I've described is in written form. If you're looking for some late night reading, I have some copies here. Feel free to take one. Otherwise, we do have it up on our website, which is really just search OHSU Tech Transfer. You'll come up with our website. It's up there as a PDF that you can search. Go really more into the patenting process and what's all involved there, which could take half a day to really describe. So that's that. Other news events, I just have to put a plug in for these. We have a quarterly newsletter that we started in June. The next issue will be coming out hopefully next week. We give updates on what's happening in OHSU in terms of technology commercialization, entrepreneurism, etc., as well as what's happening in the world, what's happening in the nation in terms of legislation, law changes that are affecting what we do. If you're interested in startup companies or starting your own company, our second annual Startup Symposium is October 10th. It's a full day. The first part of the day, actually I have that, it's changed, but the first half of the day is at the old library, and then the second half of the day is at the Dornbecker Bay Auditorium. So if you're interested in startups, or maybe not even, but want to learn more about it, it will be an entertaining and informational day. And then, as I mentioned, Arvin did a noontime brown bag seminar on patents, software patents and licensing last month. Our next event is later October on how to pitch to industry. So you know what you do in your lab, you know your research, you know what your capabilities are. Now, how do you pitch that to industry in what you do? So that's going to be led by our business development group, but really, I don't want to say it, but how to sell yourself, how to sell your research to industry partners. Okay, so that's about it. Again, we'd be happy to come back, or Trina can come back and talk about MTAs all day long, or Arvin can talk about the patenting licensing process more in depth. We hope this was a useful overview of where we can help out in the entire research continuum, from you have an idea, what do I do now, how do I get funding for that idea, to now I've got an invention, let's see if I should protect it or not. That's what we're here for, to help make that decision. We don't expect you to be able to make a decision, oh yeah, this is something I should copyright, or this is something I should patent. That's what we do day in and day out. So we want you to work with us and feel comfortable calling, emailing us, and working with us. Okay? Thank you.